The universe, as it happened, had been having a perfectly mediocre Tuesday. Broadcasting executive Kenth 442 of the Cathari Empire had been enjoying what passed for midday entertainment across the civilized sectors, another tedious documentary about pre-contact species management. The kind of self-congratulatory dreck that made administrators feel important while audiences dozed through educational programming about the Empire's benevolent oversight of lesser worlds. Today we examine the fascinating behavioral patterns of isolated planetary cultures, droned the narrator, whose voice possessed all the charisma of a malfunctioning food processor. Note how these primitive societies create elaborate mythological frameworks to explain natural phenomena they cannot comprehend. Kenth 442 wasn't really watching. Nobody was. The documentary played on 17,000 screens across the mid-rim territories, background noise for bureaucrats filing reports about substrate taxation rates and atmospheric composition requirements. Standard procedure. Broadcast improving content to maintain the illusion of cultural advancement while everyone focused on more pressing concerns, like next quarter's asteroid mining projections. The documentary cut to footage of some unremarkable blue-green planet in the outer spiral. Typical backwater world, single moon, moderate gravitational well, inhabitants who hadn't figured out faster-than-light travel. The camera panned across landscapes that looked generic enough to represent any of the 12,000 catalog worlds awaiting eventual integration into galactic commerce networks. Translation. Places too insignificant to bother conquering. These beings construct crude narratives about sky-dwelling entities, the narrator continued, displaying the predictable pattern of pre-technological civilizations attributing unknown phenomena to supernatural intervention. Kenth 442 reached for his stimulant beverage, wondering how the documentary producers managed to make xenoanthropology sound even more boring than usual when every screen in his office went black. Complete signal termination across all channels. Not a flicker, not static. Dead air that felt somehow intentional. Technical difficulties, muttered Kenth 442, jabbing at his control interface. Standard protocol demanded immediate backup channel activation, but the backup channels showed the same thing. Nothing. Then the screens blazed back to life, displaying something that definitely wasn't approved programming. A crude transmission, primitive by any reasonable technical standard, but broadcasting with impossible signal strength. The kind of raw power output that should have required a Class 7 amplification array, not whatever jury-rigged equipment was clearly responsible for this interruption. The image resolved into what appeared to be a bipedal organic entity sitting behind some kind of makeshift communication terminal. The being looked directly into the camera with an expression that Kenth 442's translation software unhelpfully labeled as confident smugness. "Greetings, Galactic Neighborhood," the being said in a voice that somehow managed to sound both casual and deeply annoying. "We know you can hear us because, frankly, your communication security is embarrassing. We've been listening to your broadcasts for quite some time now, and we have some thoughts." Kenth 442 nearly choked on his beverage. His office communication device started chirping with incoming priority alerts from colleagues across the sector. "This is Broadcasting Control. We have unauthorized signal override on all primary channels," crackled his supervisor's voice through the intercom. "Technical analysis shows transmission origin from Sector 7 Gamma, but that's impossible. No registered civilizations in that region possess broadcast capability." On screen, the unknown being continued talking with the casual confidence of someone who clearly didn't understand they were committing approximately 47 different categories of galactic law violations. "Now, we realize this might seem presumptuous," the entity said, consulting what appeared to be handwritten notes. "After all, we're just the locals from what you've been calling Catalog World 7 Gamma Delta 9. Charming designation, by the way. Really captures the personal touch. Kenth 442's secondary screen lit up with emergency communications from broadcast stations across 12 star systems. Every facility reporting the same phenomenon. Complete signal hijacking by an unknown source with impossible transmission power. Sir, we're getting reports from monitoring stations throughout the sector. His assistant's voice came through the intercom, pitched higher than usual with barely controlled panic. Whatever's broadcasting this signal is overpowering our entire network. They're broadcasting on frequencies that should require industrial-grade equipment, but spectral analysis suggests they're using technology we don't recognize. The being on screen turned a page of their primitive notes with deliberate slowness. We've been meaning to introduce ourselves properly for some time now, they continued. But honestly, your conversation topics weren't particularly compelling. Substrate taxation and mining rights? Really? That's the best you can do with faster-than-light communication? We have primitive radio networks that generate more interesting content. How are they accessing our broadcast network? Kenth 442 demanded into his communicator. Unknown, sir. Security analysis shows no sign of system intrusion. They appear to be simply overpowering our signals through brute force transmission strength. But the power requirements should be beyond the capabilities of any pre-contact civilization. The being leaned forward slightly, and their expression shifted to something Kenth 442's software labeled as predatory amusement. Oh, and about those pre-contact civilization classifications, the entity said, as if responding directly to the conversation happening in broadcast control centers across the galaxy. We need to discuss your record keeping. Some significant inaccuracies there, but that's a conversation for later. They stood up from their improvised broadcast position, and the camera angle revealed they were operating from what appeared to be converted agricultural storage facility. Crude by galactic standards, but clearly functional enough to hack the most sophisticated communication network in known space. For now, we just wanted to let you know that we're ready to talk. Properly this time. Not your usual primitive species management approach, but actual conversation between civilizations that have things to offer each other. The transmission held for another moment, the being looking directly into the camera with an expression that somehow managed to convey both friendliness and veiled threat. We'll be in touch soon, and next time we'll probably skip the unauthorized broadcast interruption. Probably. The screen went black again, and normal programming resumed as if nothing had happened. Kenth 442 sat in his office, staring at his now ordinary entertainment display, while his communication device exploded with priority alerts from administrators across the civilized galaxy. The universe was no longer having a mediocre Tuesday. The Zephyrian Mathematics Collective had been working on the transmission for 6 standard rotations without sleep, which for their species meant approximately 3 days of obsessive number crunching. Their computational arrays filled an entire crystalline chamber, pulsing with bioluminescent calculations as they attempted to decode what they insisted was clearly an encrypted mathematical theorem. The frequency modulations follow a precise sequential pattern, announced primary mathematician Vel Kin, her tentacles dancing across holographic displays. See how the carrier wave amplitude corresponds to what can only be prime number relationships? This is obviously a proof demonstrating their understanding of higher dimensional mathematics. Secondary mathematician Thex Nu disagreed with the vigorous head-bobbing that constituted academic debate among his people. Incorrect analysis. The signal's underlying structure suggests musical composition theory. These beings are transmitting a complex harmonic arrangement that demonstrates sophisticated aesthetic sensibilities. Neither mathematician considered the possibility that the signal might simply be what it appeared to be, a straightforward message delivered by beings who apparently found subtlety overrated. Meanwhile, 3 sectors away, the Vorth Military Analysis Division had reached entirely different conclusions. General Krex Vak studied the transmission data with the grim satisfaction of someone finally vindicated after decades of warning colleagues about potential external threats. "This is clearly a declaration of hostilities," he informed the assembled War Council, his scarred exoskeleton catching the harsh light of the briefing chamber. "Note the aggressive posture of the transmitting entity. The direct eye contact represents challenge behavior. The casual dismissal of our technological capabilities constitutes strategic intimidation." "Sir," interjected Intelligence Officer Zanko, "linguistic analysis suggests the transmission contains elements of what their species might consider humor. The phrases about taxation and mining rights appear designed to generate amusement rather than fear." General Krexvak's mandibles clicked dismissively. "Psychological warfare. They mock our administrative functions to demonstrate contempt for established authority structures. Classic pre-invasion strategy." "But sir, they specifically mentioned wanting to have conversations. Negotiations from a position of strength. They've demonstrated ability to penetrate our most secure networks. Next comes the ultimatum." The general gestured at the tactical displays showing troop deployment options across 17 different star systems. "I recommend immediate defensive positioning around critical infrastructure targets." The intelligence officer decided not to mention that the beings had ended their transmission with what translation software interpreted as a polite farewell. In the philosophical gardens of Nethara Prime, the situation received an entirely different interpretation. Elder Contemplator Sesh Varen meditated beneath the floating crystal formations, while junior philosophers debated the transmission's deeper meanings. "Consider the existential implications," mused Contemplator Yith Ila, her gossamer wings shimmering as she hovered near the memory pools. "These beings speak of readiness for actual conversation. This suggests they perceive current galactic discourse as somehow inauthentic." "Perhaps," replied Contemplator Nexvor, "but examine the linguistic structure. They reference things to offer each other, implying transactional relationships rather than pure intellectual exchange. Their consciousness appears to operate within commodity frameworks." Elder Sesh Varen opened one ancient eye. "You're both overcomplicating this. The transmission's most significant element is its directness. No ceremonial greetings, no cultural context establishment, no acknowledgement of hierarchical positioning. They simply spoke as equals. The younger philosophers exchanged glances. Among the Nethara, suggesting someone might be equal to someone else without proper philosophical justification bordered on radical thinking." "Elder," ventured Contemplator Ith Ila, "surely you don't mean they consider themselves equivalent to established galactic civilizations. They haven't demonstrated mastery of higher consciousness techniques or temporal perception enhancement." "Haven't they?" The Elder's remaining eyes opened slowly. "They penetrated our communication networks, delivered their message to every civilized world simultaneously, and departed before anyone could respond. Sounds like fairly advanced temporal manipulation to me. Back in the Kethari administrative centers, xenolinguist 4th class Morek 233 had been assigned the tedious job of producing an official translation for bureaucratic records. Unlike his colleagues in other civilizations, he possessed the unremarkable qualification of actually listening to what the beings had said rather than interpreting it through cultural assumptions. His preliminary report sat on his supervisor's desk, ignored in favor of more pressing concerns, like updating the incident classification codes and determining which department should handle unauthorized broadcast violations. "Supervisor Kenth 442, Morek 233 said, entering the office with his translation pad. "I've completed the linguistic analysis of the transmission. The language structure is remarkably straightforward. No hidden meanings, no cultural metaphors, no encrypted information. They meant exactly what they said." Kenth 442 looked up from a stack of emergency protocol forms. Meaning what, exactly? They've been monitoring our communications for an extended period. They find our current broadcast content insufficiently interesting. They wish to establish diplomatic contact on terms of mutual respect rather than the standard pre-contact civilization management protocols. That's it. That's it, sir. They appear to communicate with remarkable directness, almost disconcertingly so. Kenth 442 processed this information while stamping approval seals on various crisis response documents. What about their claims regarding our record-keeping inaccuracies? Morek 233 consulted his notes. They didn't elaborate, but the phrasing suggests they have specific information about our civilization classification systems that they believe to be incorrect. How could a pre-contact species possess information about internal administrative procedures? Unknown, sir. But based on their demonstrated ability to access our broadcast networks, information gathering might not present significant challenges for them. Before Kenth 442 could respond, his communication device chimed with an incoming priority message from Sector Administration. The text scrolled across his display with the bureaucratic urgency that indicated someone in higher management was beginning to panic. All department heads report to Emergency Assembly Chamber 7 immediately. Full xenological crisis protocols now in effect. Department of External Affairs assuming operational control pending threat assessment completion. Morek 233 glanced at the message display. Sir, should I include my translation analysis in the emergency briefing materials? Kenth 442 was already reaching for his ceremonial administrative cloak, the one reserved for occasions when his career might be ending. Bring everything. And Morek? Yes, sir? Next time unknown aliens hijack our communication networks, try to have your translation ready faster. Apparently, directness isn't the only thing we're unprepared for. As they headed toward the emergency assembly, neither of them noticed the small addendum buried in Morek 233's linguistic analysis notes, a reference to certain phrases in the transmission that suggested the beings possessed knowledge of specific Cathari cultural practices that weren't included in any external databases, information that should have been impossible for any pre-contact civilization to acquire. Archive technician Dexcol had spent 12 years managing historical data files in the basement levels of the Cathari administrative complex, a career path that guaranteed both job security and social invisibility, which explained why nobody had bothered to inform him about the current crisis before he stumbled across the connection that was about to ruin everyone's day. He'd been cross-referencing emergency protocol activation records when his search parameters accidentally pulled up restricted anthropological survey files dating back several centuries. Routine data maintenance, except the file access logs showed recent activity from multiple departments that supposedly had nothing to do with primitive species research. That's odd, Dexcol muttered, pulling up the detailed records. The files contained observation reports from something called the Discrete Cultural Monitoring Initiative, a program he'd never heard of despite supposedly having administrative access to all departmental archives. The first report made him sit down hard in his ergonomic chair. Survey Report 447 Alpha. Target species demonstrates remarkable adaptability in response to indirect technological exposure. Recommend continued passive observation to document cultural evolution patterns. Note: subjects appear to incorporate witnessed phenomena into mythological frameworks with impressive consistency. The report was dated 300 standard cycles ago. The target coordinates matched Catalog World 7 Gamma Delta 9. Oh no, whispered Dexcol, scrolling through hundreds of similar reports. Oh no, no, no. The deeper he dug, the worse it got. Multiple alien civilizations had been conducting anthropological studies on the same planet for millennia, apparently without coordinating their efforts or informing each other. the Vorth had been testing the being's military responses to various stimuli. The Zephyrians had been dropping mathematical puzzles disguised as crop formations. The Nethara had been conducting philosophical experiments through induced dream states. Everyone had been treating the planet like their personal laboratory. Survey Report 1247 Gamma introduced advanced metallurgy concepts through controlled technology dispersal. Subjects successfully reverse-engineered basic propulsion principles within acceptable parameters. Cultural adaptation remains within predicted ranges. Dex Cole's hands trembled as he accessed the cross-referenced files. Equipment malfunction reports. Accidental crashes. Technical failures that weren't failures at all, but deliberate technology transfers designed to see how quickly the subjects could adapt. His communication device chimed with an incoming message from his supervisor. Emergency data retrieval request. All files related to Catalog World 7 Gamma Delta 9 to be forwarded immediately to Crisis Management Team Alpha. Too late for that, as it turned out. Dex Cole opened the most recent survey report, filed just 2 standard rotations before the broadcast interruption. The author was listed as field researcher Yex Tonara, apparently embedded in something called a long-term observation post. Final report. Subject species has achieved breakthrough in quantum communication detection. Recommend immediate cessation of all monitoring activities. Subjects appear to have developed capability to intercept our standard communication protocols. Several instances of subjects staring directly at concealed observation equipment suggest awareness of surveillance activities. Request extraction authorization. The timestamp showed the report had been filed 18 hours before the broadcast interruption. Dex Cole scrolled to the emergency addendum, filed 2 hours later. Extraction impossible. Subjects have surrounded observation facility with primitive but effective containment field. They're broadcasting our previous communications back to us through jury-rigged amplification equipment. They know everything. Repeat, they know everything. His desk communicator exploded with incoming priority alerts, but Dex Cole was reading the final entry in the file, submitted just 6 hours before the galactic broadcast. Personal log, field researcher Yex Tonara. The subjects have provided me with what they call coffee and explained that they've been aware of our presence for approximately 50 of their local years. They find our research methodology charmingly naive and have compiled detailed critiques of our observational techniques. They've also prepared what they describe as presentation materials for when they're ready to introduce themselves to the broader galactic community. I have been invited to attend this presentation as their guest. I believe I'm going to accept. 3 levels above, in Emergency Assembly Chamber 7, Crisis Management Team Alpha was receiving briefings from every major civilization about their interpretation of the mysterious broadcast, while completely unaware that one of their own technicians had discovered why all their theories were completely wrong. The mathematical analysis confirms sophisticated intelligence, reported the Zephyrian delegation via holographic projection. We recommend immediate cultural exchange protocols. General Krexvak's scarred form dominated the Vorth section of the chamber. Threat assessment indicates hostile intentions. Recommend preemptive defensive measures. The Nethara representative materialized in a shimmer of gossamer light. Philosophical evaluation suggests existential challenge to current paradigms. We propose extended contemplation period. Administrator Genth Vex, who had the misfortune of being in charge during the crisis, gestured for order. Has anyone discovered how they gained access to our communication networks? A chorus of negative responses filled the chamber, each more confidently wrong than the last. Technical analysis shows impossible power output for their developmental level, reported the Cathari Engineering Division. Linguistic patterns suggest cultural frameworks incompatible with established diplomatic protocols, added the translation department. Economic modeling indicates insufficient resource base for the technology they've demonstrated, concluded the Commerce Guild representatives. Everyone agreed the situation made no sense according to their established models of how pre-contact civilizations were supposed to behave, which might have been more troubling if any of them had bothered to question whether their models bore any relationship to reality. In the basement archives, Dexcol discovered the final piece of evidence that was going to transform this crisis from embarrassing to catastrophic. A message file, apparently uploaded through their own communication systems during the broadcast interruption. "Greetings, archive technician Dex Cole," it began, somehow knowing exactly who would find it. "By the time you read this, you'll have discovered that your various galactic civilizations have been studying us for quite some time. We appreciate the attention, though your research ethics need work." The message continued with casual friendliness that somehow made everything worse. "We've compiled comprehensive observations about your civilizations based on your researchers' behavior, communication patterns, and technological capabilities. Quite fascinating material. We'll be sharing our findings during our upcoming diplomatic introduction, along with our recommendations for improving your current governmental and social systems." Dexcol felt a chill that had nothing to do with the basement temperature. "Please don't worry about field researcher Yex Tonora. She's quite comfortable and has been very helpful in explaining your cultural practices. Did you know she's never seen a democratic election? We've arranged a demonstration. She seemed confused by the concept of voluntary power transfer, but she's adapting quickly." The message concluded with a postscript that made Dex Cole wonder if his pension benefits included psychological counseling. "P.S. Your emergency assembly is discussing response strategies to our broadcast. We can hear everything. Your chamber's acoustic dampening systems don't work against the listening devices we installed during maintenance cycles. You might want to mention that to Administrator Genth Vex. Also, the Vorth delegation's secret military. Preparations are visible from orbit. We have satellites now. Lovely view of your fleet positioning." Dex Cole stared at his screen, calculating how quickly he could update his resume and apply for work in a completely different star system. The universe, it appeared, had been conducting a very different experiment than anyone realized. The complete decryption arrived at exactly 0800 Standard Galactic Time, delivered simultaneously to every major governmental facility across known space through what appeared to be their own internal communication systems, which, as it turned out, was precisely the point. Supreme Coordinator Blex Marathon of the Intersystem Administrative Council stared at the document materializing on her secured terminal, watching page after page of text appear with the inexorable certainty of a bureaucratic nightmare achieving sentience. "Comprehensive Organizational Assessment and Efficiency Optimization Proposal," read the header, formatted in the bland corporate styling that made her administrative soul wither slightly. "Prepared by Earth Strategic Consulting Group, Terran Sol System. Client, Galactic Civilization, all participating entities." She scrolled past the executive summary with growing horror, recognizing the unmistakable structure of a management consulting report. The kind that arrived just before massive organizational restructuring and involuntary career transitions. "Based on our extensive observational analysis," the document began, "we have identified numerous operational inefficiencies, redundant administrative structures, and missed synergy opportunities within your current governmental frameworks." In the Vorth Military Command Center, General Krexvak read the same document with mounting disbelief as it critiqued their outdated hierarchical command structures and recommended flattening organizational layers to improve decision-making velocity. "They're suggesting we eliminate half our officer positions," he growled to his staff, mandibles clicking with agitation. "According to their analysis, our military operates with insufficient delegation authority and excessive approval bottlenecks." His intelligence officer leaned over to read the relevant section. "Sir, they've diagrammed our entire command structure, including classifications levels they shouldn't know exist." "How is that possible?" "Unknown, sir. But they've also included efficiency metrics comparing our resource allocation to what they call industry best practices. Apparently, we're operating at 63% of optimal effectiveness." General Krexvak discovered that military training hadn't prepared him for existential questions about performance reviews conducted by species that were supposed to be primitive. The Zephyrian Mathematics Collective received a section dedicated entirely to computational resource optimization and knowledge management integration. Primary mathematician Vel Kin found herself reading detailed suggestions for improving their calculation methodologies, complete with algorithms they'd never seen before. "They've solved our sustainable energy equations," she announced to her colleagues, tentacles trembling with what might have been excitement or terror. "The mathematical proofs are elegant, more elegant than our current approaches." "But how did they know what we were working on?" asked secondary mathematician Thex Nu. "According to this footnote, they've been monitoring our research broadcasts and identified what they call computational dead ends in our methodology. They're offering to share improved techniques in exchange for participation in what they describe as collaborative knowledge development initiatives." The Nethera philosophical community received the most unsettling section of all, a detailed analysis of their contemplative decision-making processes, with recommendations for streamlining philosophical consensus building. Elder contemplator Sesh Varen floated motionless above the memory pools, processing suggestions that their centuries-old debate traditions might benefit from structured facilitation techniques and outcome-oriented discussion frameworks. "They're proposing to teach us more efficient methods of philosophical inquiry," she announced to the assembled contemplators, her voice carrying the bewildered tone of someone whose life's work had just been performance-reviewed by enthusiastic amateurs. "But surely our contemplative traditions represent the pinnacle of intellectual discourse," protested contemplator Ith Ayla. "According to their analysis, our current methods achieve suboptimal consensus velocity and suffer from excessive recursive discussion loops. They've included case studies demonstrating improved philosophical productivity through applied methodological refinements." Back on Keth Ari Prime, Supreme Coordinator Blex Marathon had reached the section titled Implementation Timeline and Voluntary Participation Incentives. Her career in galactic administration had prepared her for many challenges, but not for receiving corporate restructuring proposals from species that weren't supposed to understand the concept of quarterly performance targets. Phase 1 involves establishing formal diplomatic relations through standard recognition protocols, she read aloud to her emergency council. Phase 2 introduces collaborative efficiency improvement programs across all participating civilizations. Phase 3 implements comprehensive governmental optimization strategies based on comparative analysis of successful organizational models. Her deputy coordinator raised a trembling appendage. "Supreme Coordinator, what are the participation incentives they mention?" Blex Marathon scrolled to the relevant section, her expression growing increasingly hollow. "Access to improved technologies, enhanced resource allocation methodologies, and what they describe as innovative social coordination frameworks that have eliminated most forms of internal conflict within our species. And if civilizations choose not to participate? They've included a risk assessment analysis. Non-participating entities will experience what they call competitive disadvantage acceleration as participating civilizations implement superior operational efficiencies." She paused, reading the fine print. "They've also noted that they've already shared these optimization proposals with 17 other species beyond our current galactic administrative zone." The council chamber fell silent as the implications settled in. They were being presented with a choice between voluntary participation in their own organizational restructuring or involuntary obsolescence, as their neighbors adopted superior management practices. The document concluded with a cheerfully professional closing statement that somehow managed to be more threatening than any military ultimatum. We look forward to productive collaboration opportunities and mutually beneficial efficiency improvements. Please respond within 30 standard rotations to schedule your civilization's initial consultation session. Earth Strategic Consulting Group will be establishing permanent diplomatic facilities on Kepler Station next month. Light refreshments will be provided during all initial meetings. As governmental leaders across the galaxy grappled with the realization that they were being conquered through performance optimization and meeting facilitation, field researcher Yex Tonara was experiencing her first democratic election from the inside of what humans called a polling station. So everyone just chooses who makes decisions? She asked her human guide, watching citizens mark ballots with the casual efficiency of people who found the process unremarkable. Pretty much. We figured out a while ago that letting people pick their own leaders works better than having leaders pick themselves. But how do you maintain administrative continuity? We don't, really. That's the point. Every few years, we change everything that isn't working and keep the stuff that is. Yex Tonara processed this information while observing the orderly transfer of governmental authority happening around her. No military coups. No hereditary succession crises, no philosophical debates about the inherent legitimacy of power structures, just beings choosing their representatives and getting on with their lives. You know, she said finally, my supervisors are going to hate this. Her human guide grinned with the expression that was becoming disturbingly familiar to civilizations across the galaxy. We're counting on it. The universe had discovered that the most effective form of conquest involved helping people optimize their inefficiencies, whether they wanted optimization or not. And the truly unsettling part was how polite the conquerors were being about it.